Everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. With respect to the agenda items, I have a couple of changes. One is that I would like to move the recognition of our Eagle Scout in Coleman, to the beginning. And since it's a school night, Coleman, I'm sure you'd rather get home to studies and also avoid the hot room. Second is also John Penny's here from the county to talk about census, and I figured, well, people are young and fresh, for the evening. It's an important topic which has a significant impact on the town, or potentially can, as census is undercounted. So I'll move those right before the public hearing so we can take care of that. Also, we have two items that we are removing, tonight. One is removal of the Downey oil, since there wasn't enough time, Bill, as I understand it, to get some of the answers that you need and discuss with David and Barbara. And so we'll postpone that for another time. And then also with respect to the park signs, we haven't been able to have an internal meeting as hoped because of busy schedule. So that will come off tonight, but go on to the next agenda. We haven't been able to, I think Jim Horan, get together, with us for the meeting. So that unfortunately will take off for tonight. And apologize to everyone for the heat. And we've been going through our major renovation, which is long overdue, for the air conditioning and heating system. And the contractors originally thought we'd be in the cool time of the year, already starting in fall. Unfortunately, it's the hottest first day of fall, I think, on record, or something close to that. So apologize. We do have fans, but it makes so much noise it's hard to hear. So we'll bear with it as much as we can, and then Steve Frazier, our buildings guru here, will help try to correct that later on. So the first item is a motion to adopt the agenda items subject to the changes that I had mentioned.
I just want to make
yeah,
one
sure.
point, please. I'd like to have the park rules back on next month's agenda.
Yes, that's the plan.
I'll make that motion with the amendments.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays, abstentions? The motion passes. The next motion is to acknowledge the minutes of September 9th, 2019.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Just on the point, though, I'm curious to know why some of the minutes are verbatim and some of the minutes are not verbatim.
I just took the style, the change it, and I copied and pasted. No legal reason.
Okay, because the first 4 pages are verbatim minutes. The second aspect of it is not verbatim. The third aspect is not verbatim, and the last aspect is not verbatim. So it just,
Correct, there was so much in that discussion that it was just easy enough to just take what she had spoken about and just take copy and paste.
okay. I just would rather we be consistent if we're going to do verbatim public comment period. If it's verbatim, it should be everyone's verbatim, not just one person's
But
verbatim.
there are times when I've taken the dissertation of Joey when he had spoken to other people and just copied and pasted what the creations are. There's been a number of times I've done it.
Okay, thank you.
But I would agree, I do agree with Mr. Bill where we can, have that consistency. We should, for the record. I know that, Mr. Paoloni has tried hard to try to capture it, but I agree with you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. So, the first item.
Just a point of order, I interrupted the.
Oh, that's right, we have to vote.
You can call the vote.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the point of order. The first item is the board wants to recognize with great pride that the community service that Coleman Dusavage has performed for the town. He's an Eagle Scout. We had the opportunity to attend his ceremony during the summer. His scout project was improving the Fleetwood Park, and it was actually a great job. We got a lot of compliments, and actually, Coleman, we've had numerous requests for your services in other parts of the town, such as Quiet Acres, for example. So maybe you have a future job opportunity there. But seriously, it was a tremendous job. It really revitalized that park as we all have seen. So the resolution reads, and then when I'm done, Coleman, if you'd like to come up and we'll, hand it to you and get a picture, with you. Whereas we, the members of the town board of the town of Wappinger, Dutchess County, New York, hereby recognize and thank Coleman J. Dusavage for his commendable work on beautifying Fleetwood Park for his Eagle Scout. And whereas Coleman J. Dusavage, currently a senior at Roy C. Ketchum High School, has improved the quality of life for the residents of the Fleetwood neighborhood and of the town of Wappinger by improving the playground and basketball court at Fleetwood Park. And whereas Coleman J. Dusavage has attained the honorable rank of Eagle Scout, which lasts with him forever, as Bill and I know. That wasn't in the resolution, I just ad-libbing
You
there.
didn't put once an eagle, always an eagle?
No, I didn't do that.
I'd like to move to amend the no, I'm sorry.
Which is the highest rank in scouting, for his admirable Eagle Scout project, which I just mentioned. Now therefore, be it resolved that this recognition has been read into the official record during the regular meeting of the Wappinger Town Board on Monday, September 23rd, 2019, and presented by myself, Richard L. Thurston, and the town board members. So, a round of applause for Colin. We are really quite pleased with the scouting, organizations here in the town. And as I said, Mr. Bill and I are Eagle Scouts and very proud of it. And actually, I'm meeting with Mr. Horton, the Scout Director, Executive Director, next week to talk about more that we can do. And I'll let you know. So here you go. Thank you. Congratulations very much.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
The next item on the rearranged agenda is we're going to have a presentation by John Penny of Dutchess County on the census plan for how it's going to go about, being done. This is an extremely important year, when the census is done next year, very important project, and one that I think has gotten off to, unfortunately, a little bit of a false start, as John may say, because of things out of Washington and concerns that people may have. But it's important to the town because, and all the towns, municipalities, because the census results, and you can talk more about it, John, really generate revenue, based on the numbers that come in, then whether it's grants, whether it's aid or other considerations are made to the different municipalities based on that. And therefore, any undercount that may happen, would hurt, Wappinger. So I'll turn the floor over to you. Introduce yourself so everybody knows.
That was a perfect introduction. I appreciate it. I'm John Penny. I work under a unique partnership with Dutchess County and the City of Poughkeepsie in communications. I work mostly for the city, but I also work for the county, doing basically special tasks, and this is one of them. I've been named the chairperson of the Dutchess County Complete Count Committee. Our charge is to raise awareness indeed about the 2020 census. Seema Rizvi is a member of the committee, and she's here tonight to give me some more.
Stand up, say hi.
Hello. Giving me some moral support, so I appreciate that. Just briefly, I've been doing this work for the government for about 6 months, but just to let you know, and I know some of you know this and know me, I used to be the opinion editor at the Poughkeepsie Journal for about 20 years, so I have a pretty good sense of the area and everything. And quite frankly, on a personal note, been enjoying getting back out to these different communities and touching base with people about what I think is a really important issue. So why is the census important? Well, for one thing, everyone should be counted. If we have people living in the United States, we should make sure that everyone is counted. The census tries to count, or its goal is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place, and I can explain that further if we need more detail. Well, again, why is that important? Well, it's about fair representation. We could start with that. Once these numbers are finalized, they will determine how congressional lines are drawn. And I always like to make this point. I think it's really important to drive home the local impact of this. Before 2010, we had 3 congressional representatives in this area. Now we have 2. That was a direct result of the 2010 count. So I feel like I could almost stop there in terms of explaining the importance of the census. Next slide. But it's also about money, and a lot of it. $675 billion are at stake. This involves 132 programs, everything from highway to housing, to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, better known as SNAP, to something I know that is near and dear to all of your hearts, the Community Development Block Grants, which really are in some ways the lifeblood of municipalities in terms of how they get their funding. So again, this money will be determined how it gets spent based on the census figures. Next slide. So you might ask, how is this going to work? And that's a very good question. What's going to happen is in March, about 95% of the households are going to receive the census invitation in the mail. So the good news is for the vast majority of us, this is pretty straightforward. You're going to get an invitation to take the census. You're going to get a mailing that invites you to take the census. And for the first time ever, you're going to have a chance to do that online if you want. And that's what the census is hoping the vast majority of people will do. And so that's a good thing. Hopefully it's going to make things a little bit easier for people. Next slide. So as a journalist, I would always ask, okay, well, that's 95%. What about the other 5%, right? You want to know how the more complicated cases are going to be handled. And that basically involves people who have P.O. boxes. The census tracks by address. That's a very important part of this. So if you have a P.O. box, that's not good enough. They won't send a census to a P.O. box. They need an actual physical address to send it to. Also, if you're in the middle of a natural disaster, they'll come to that area, obviously, with people dealing with that. And then something I found really interesting, I didn't know. I knew a little bit about the census, covering it as a journalist, but they actually start the census earlier in some places, the beginning of next year in what I call far-flung places like northern Maine and remote part of Alaska, which they know they're going to have to get out into the field and do that work. Next one. So one of the lines I keep saying is, you know, fill it out online and get on with your life, and that there are some complicated cases involving the census. Some people have 2 homes. Some people may not be healed legally. There's all sorts of different cases where people are going to be tougher to count, quite frankly. So one of the messages I want to send is, if you're not a tough to count person, if this is pretty straightforward for you, please do it, because the census is going to be spending a lot of time in the field trying to handle cases that are far more complicated for a lot of different reasons. So the other thing to know is that the census is very persistent. They're not going to stop just at one reminder. They're going to send you a couple of reminders if you haven't filled it out. Eventually, they will send it to you via paper if they have to, but again, the whole idea is to get people to fill it out online. You could also do it over the phone. And this will continue throughout March. April 1st is actually the official census day. And then sometime starting in late April, they'll essentially start giving up that people are going to do it the way they want, and they're going to get out into the field and start the process of knocking on people's doors and trying to get them to fill out the census that way. So next one. So yes, the supervisor did allude to controversy which had to do with the citizenship question. I can tell you that the citizenship question is not on the form. This is maybe a little personal anecdote. When I was told I was being asked to do this assignment, that question was still, it wasn't clear whether that question was going to be on the form or not. So I reached out to the census and I said, well, how do you, as a person representing the census in a sense, in terms of through the county, what do I tell people? What is the official census line? And the line was actually what I was hoping it was. It was, I thought, a very responsible line. The census line on that question is, while we encourage everyone to fill out every question in the census, we would be remiss in saying that if you decide to leave one or two questions off, your census in all likelihood will still count. The most important information that the census needs is your name and your address and the number of people that are living in your residence. That's the basic information that it needs. The census also is confidential. Not only can the census not share the information with the public, it can't even share it with other federal agencies. If someone does so, they face a possibility of a $250,000 fine or 5 years in prison.
So who's the watchdog for that? Because obviously a lot of people don't have a sense of confidence that that's going to be followed, right? And what is the greater assurance? Is there a watchdog, attorney general?
Yeah,
or what's done?
there would be a number of agencies, as a matter of, also whistleblowers. I don't believe anyone has ever been charged with that, or if they have, it was a long time ago. But I don't know specifically who would be handled. It would be, I would assume that it would be the attorney general. It is probably inspector general. There's an internal audits of the agency, like there would be any other agency that, you know, gets internal audits and everything like that. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is just about a survey about who is more likely to fill out the census. I'm a little suspect of this as someone who was in journalism a long time. We did reader surveys all the time, and people would say things like, we want to read more positive stories about education. But metrics show that that's not always the case, that those aren't not the stories that people click on. And so I think to some degree people are telling people like, yeah, I'm going to fill this out. I think we have, and I don't want to be too dire here, but I think we have some tough sledding. And the reason for that is, you know, remember, we only do this once every 10 years. And I would just say that over the last 10 years that the trust in government certainly hasn't, I don't think, really improved. I don't think people feel that online security has improved. I feel like there's a big concern about that, and is concerns about breaches. The census has never had a breach. There have been other breaches in government, but the census has not been one of those places that has had that. And directly connected to this, children are historically vastly undercounted in the census, and I can't emphasize this point enough. The reason being that if you have a 10-month-old, say, and you're filling out the census, you may think that, oh, this isn't germane to my child. I don't need to count a 10-month-old child, but you actually do. And the second reason, which is probably the biggest reason, is just people don't want to give out information about their children. But so it's hugely important that kids also get counted in the census. And again, there's the view of this is that historically they are dramatically undercounted. Next one. So I mentioned we have a complete count committee. I'm very proud of this committee. We've been working for 2 months and we're working really hard. I was asked by the county executive to chair this committee, and then he asked me for a bunch of names of people who he thought that I thought could do a good job on this. I sent him this list of people. Within 25 minutes, I got an email back from him, and he said, looks good, go for it. And I was really grateful for that. And then I reached out to all of these committee members, and everyone signed up. It was. I don't know if you ever tried to put together a 15-person committee, but I could not believe how quickly it happened. I was really grateful for that. But if you look at those names there, it's a very diverse group. And when I talk about diversity, I'm not just talking about their racial makeup, it's also their age. We have people on that group that have been doing community outreach for decades. And we've also have people who have been doing it for just a few years, but have really made a name for themselves, and this is really important. They've made a name for themselves in the pockets of population that we're really gonna need to, we're gonna have a harder time counting. So that was the strategy behind this. The other thing I want to
Excuse me for a second,
yeah.
is that information online at the county?
Absolutely, yeah, and I
It's
have
online
my
at the
next,
county?
yes, and
Okay,
I'll,
thank you.
that's on the next slide, but I do want to say that as strongly as I feel about how good this committee is, that if this committee is the one trying to do all the work, we're not going to be successful. This is basically what I've been calling a human spider web. You know, this is, everyone up on that board has trusted sources. There are people that voted for you into office. That's a very personal thing that someone did, giving you your vote. You have a constituents that I am asking you to reach out to and please impart in how important it is to fill out the census. So on the last slide, there you have it. There is the web address, and I believe this will be up, we can
On
get this
our
up on,
website,
yeah.
yes.
It's on the county's website. The easiest thing to remember is completecount@dutchessny.gov. If you have any questions, please email me. That is a direct account that I have access to. And I will certainly get back to you.
Is this in bilingual?
Yes, we have materials in Spanish.
Do you have handout materials that you could drop off here? at
Absolutely.
SEMA maybe,
Yep.
drop off for somebody?
we can do
So we
that.
can put it in our information desk.
Do you have
Absol-
multiple languages besides Spanish?
The census has information in a number of languages. Right now, I have it in English and Spanish.
Okay,
But
but
if
that
you
would
have a
be a bit-
specific request, I will do everything I can to honor it.
So if somebody comes into town hall and wants it in a different language, they can,
The census, yeah,
you'll have your contact information there, and they can request that information.
that's correct.
Okay,
I
thank
do
you.
want to point out that the Complete Count Committee does not do the count.
Sure.
We're
No.
raising awareness on the count, and I will do anything humanly possible to help facilitate that, but for the most part, I'm going to be directing questions to the census, and one of the things I certainly don't want to do is give anyone misinformation.
Totally understand, I've worked on the census.
Okay.
So thank you.
Very good. So with that, I'll take any questions.
So I found it interesting looking at the town of Wappinger's projected population, which is interesting. We're looking at a 1.9% decrease in population, which is something that is unprecedented
Yep.
in this town. Has there been previously a focus on counting those that are non-citizens in the past?
I don't know. I know the charge I got from the county executive was very, very clear. It was
Yeah.
that we are going to count everyone.
So
And that was enough for me.
Right, I'm just curious to know the difference between data collection 10 years ago and data collection now, because we do have a Latino population here in our town and in the village. I would be curious to know if they were to participate in this, how our numbers would look overall.
Well, to answer your question, yes. I mean, the effort has always been made to count everyone. That's what the Constitution says. That's what the law says. So that's always been. The question was, this was a lot of misinformation that by putting this, even if the citizenship question would have been on the form, think about the logic of that. That's basically saying, it's basically given, it's basically saying that even if you're not a citizen, you could fill out this form.
Right.
That's why the question would have been there to begin with, right?
So my broader point, though, I think is perhaps those that are not citizens don't realize that they should be taking part in this process.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we're reaching out. Again, if you look at who's on that committee, we have numerous people who are work closely with the Latino population. We have, I think, 4 members that are bilingual, and so that is an effort that we're making. We're talking to farmers. We're talking to the library system, which is going to be. I just spoke to them, and they're going to be hugely helpful in everything. I don't want to hold any librarian to any particular thing, but particularly the bigger libraries may have a dedicated computer with signage that says, you could fill out your census here. So there's a lot to this. I mean, we're trying to count everyone.
I
see
Tom Lawrence on the committee. I mean,
Excuse me.
Tom Lawrence can, he's a great man. He can get the libraries to do whatever possible to facilitate this process.
And you hit on a great point. If you look at that committee, I kind of view like every member of that committee to be a subcommittee onto him or herself. The Interfaith Council,
Sure.
the executive director, I use that as an umbrella to get all religions. And that effort is underway. And I'm, you know, I don't want to sugarcoat this. We have a lot of work to do, but I think we've gotten off to a pretty good start.
So, you know, I noticed that there was no representation from the school districts, whatever,
Well,
how are you
no,
reaching out to the
oh,
schools?
Thank you, and if you, I love people poking holes in things like that. Well, Mario Johnson does represent the city of Poughkeepsie
Oh, yeah, I
Schools,
saw
but no,
that.
but we just met with the BOCES superintendent. That was, and this is a good example where the best way to reach all the superintendents is through the BOCES superintendent.
Okay.
And I'm going to be presenting at, I appreciate you bringing it up, at their meeting in October. And what I'm trying to get from them is, you know, I shouldn't even say trying, I'm sure they will, that there's a lot of classes that look for public service projects to do. This is a great one. One of our goals is to get all the schools to do some instruction on the census the beginning of next year. And here's a really important point, and to make sure that information goes home to the parents. And that the parents, the kids tell the parents, particularly again in some of these hard to count cases, that this is really important. This affects, you know, our community. I need, you know, we really need to fill this out.
Okay.
One last thing,
Sure.
John, we miss you at the Poughkeepsie Journal. You did a phenomenal job in your 20 years there.
Thank you.
Op-ed. Obviously, newspapers are one of those mediums that are going through changes, but I'm glad you landed where you did. Appreciate
Thank you.
everything you're doing.
I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, John, appreciate it very much. And thank you, Seema, for coming as well. Appreciate it. Okay, the next item will be our public hearings. So we have a motion to open the hearings.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed. So the first item will be the NERC Tractor Supply Water District expansion. This is specific resolution concerning the Water District extension number 9 as being proposed.
If I may, Mr. Supervisor, there is one typographical error in both of the Tractor Supply resolutions.
Okay.
The negative declaration was issued by the planning board rather than the town board.
I see that here, halfway down the first page. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank Mr. Alexander for pointing it out to me.
Okay. So, Mr. Clark, please make that noted amendment. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Chairman, Supervisor, excuse me. Members of the board, my name is Neil Alexander. I'm a partner at the law firm of Cuddy and Fader. I'm here tonight also with Jim Cassidy from Halsey Cassidy Engineering. It's a very basic extension. As you may be aware, the water line runs right in front of our property. We are basically looking to essentially put in a lateral 6-inch service to serve our property. And that's the full extent of the request, is to put this property, this is the only property that's being asked to be added to the district. We are not asking for the district to expend any monies associated with becoming a part of this district. We are fully going to fund that amount ourselves, and we would hope to be able to do so and become a customer of this district and, you know, pay our fair share. I think the only other thing to add is that in addition to the standard public notice, I think Councilman Beal had asked us to also to send a notification to everyone on Fowler House Road, and we had provided for the record in case someone may have missed it, an affidavit of mailing to that effect.
I appreciate that.
We had done that. And I think with that, as you know, we're beholden to the 190 Town Law 194 standard, which we believe we have met at this time. So if you have any questions, we're here to answer them, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Please. In response to the last meeting, Councilman Beal's request to send notices out, the gentleman has responded that written notices were sent out to each of the residents. Now there. Oh, She's asking what type of notice, maybe you can just clarify it for
She
the,
said she got it.
oh, you got it.
You received
Okay.
it, right?
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. So, any comments that may exist with respect to this particular resolution? Please come up, identify yourself, address, please keep it no longer than 5 minutes. I know it's hot, but also, you know, we have a lot to do tonight, so please go ahead. Thank you. Identify yourself, please, for the record.
Dwight Pfeiffer, 4 Fowler House Road. My wife and I have resided at that residence for the past 33 years. We were always aware that our property abuts a commercially zoned parcel, but never expected such a large building or business in such a small area. It had always been expected that the planning board would protect existing homeowners from such a large business in such a small parcel of land. Tractor Supply should have been either discouraged or stopped in the early stages of its development. On September 4th, the planning board approved the resolution for this project to proceed with the approval of water and sewer access that was paid by the town of Wappingers taxpayers. This was done in spite of its residents' concerns. The planning board lawyer submitted every word stipulated by Tractor Supply's reply letter dated June 29th, which was worded ambiguous in stipulation of its intent. There was no attempt to protect the homeowners from any legal wiggle room on Tractor Supply's part in their interpretation of their commitment. It appeared to me that the town lawyer was more inclined to give the Tractor Supply what they wanted rather than protect the homeowners. It was never shared that if anyone from the planning board actually walked the entire length of the proposed site. I'm only aware that the town supervisor, Dr. Thornton, and Joey Cavacino actually took the time and interest to do so.
God bless you.
Other than impromptu meetings in town hallways, did Tractor Supply even attempt to reach out to the affected and concerned homeowners to have a sit-down discussion? As you will see, they will represent themselves as bending backwards to address our concerns. But if you look closer, they will work their commitment to their advantage, legally that it is. Please note the planning board did not respond to the public appropriately review the final resolution in its entirety. There seems to be a time factor pursued by Tractor Supply to push their agenda through, which the planning board appeared to appease their efforts. Please understand that there are many things that are of concern, especially due to their appearance. I would only hope it's something that can be clarified or rectified by a more transparent process. Just please be noted that I am not in support of approving Tractor Supply for water and sewer district access by one thing is overextending our system. It appears that Tractor Supply is going to connect with the Wappingers tax-paid water and sewer, and we on Fowler House have not been afforded the access due to cost. I would like to propose that Tractor Supply be encouraged or required to at least pay $100,000 in escrow to somewhat offset the affordability to Fowler House residents to access our town water and sewer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments for this evening? Please come on up, identify yourself.
We good? All right. My name's David Selver. I reside at 13 Fowler House Road. My neighbor, Caitlin Eckerson, is unavailable to make the meeting, and she wrote a letter for me to read for you. So I'm going to go ahead and read what she wrote. So my name is Caitlin Eckerson. I reside at 10 Fowler House Road with my husband and 2 girls, a 10-month-old and a 3-year-old. I would like to thank Christine for speaking, Dave for speaking on my behalf while my family is on vacation this week. As I'm sure you have already heard from us in previous meetings, the proposed construction of Tractor Supply on a small 6-acre lot that abuts our residents is a huge infringement on our privacy, well-being, secondary to noise disturbance, pollution, and possibly health concerns, and loss of home value. Before you say that this is not the meeting to bring this up, I can assure you that all ties in together as why we're against Tractor Supply and the fact that they are proposing to get town water and sewer or sewage for just themselves, but not us. At the previous meeting, has been brought up that there are many vacant lots along Route 9 that would be more than adequate for Tractor Supply. The buildings are already established and in a highly commercial area without severely infringing on an established residential street. Tractor Supply responded that the lot that abuts our neighborhood was cheap to buy, whereas the other locations have high rent and regulations that they did not want to deal with. No one seems to have considered or frankly care that this commercial piece of land should be meant for a small business that would allow for economic growth without severely impacting the residents of Fowler House Road. It also seems as if the members of the town had their minds set about this development without even listening to any of the concerns of their residents. I understand that at one of the last meetings that it was stated that Tractor Supply is willing to pay for an extension of town water and sewer to their own property, but not to the residents abutting. And the town is also unwilling to pay for the extension. Having a large commercial building, in addition to construction that will be taking place right against our property lines, will pose significant risk to our well water, facts that I brought up at previous hearings that apparently went unheard. As cited by the EPA, pollution during construction of large commercial sites can have many negative impacts if it is done close to residential areas, as the soil is disrupted during construction and possible contaminants such as PAHS, violet organic compounds, SVOCs, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen oxides that may be present in the soil can contaminate groundwater runoff, which can seep into the underground water table and therefore contaminate our wells. Additionally, construction itself caused a great deal of air pollution due to VOCs, paint, diesel, oil, cement, asphalt, and other toxic chemicals used during construction that, as I said in the previous meetings, can also seep into the soil and contaminate the underground aquifer that feeds our private wells. Furthermore, it is cited that typical sources of potential groundwater contamination are fertilizer use and storage, construction areas, asphalt, pesticide storage, wells, and stormwater basins. While Tractor Supply states that any runoff will be directed away from the residential neighborhood into a stormwater reservoir, that stormwater reservoir, which will contain contaminated water, will seep into the underground water aquifer that again feeds the residential wells. If there's any contamination, the impact on our wells can be long-lasting and expensive. A UV system to treat any bacterial contamination can cost upwards of $1,500. If there is any heavy metal or other dangerous contaminants then a reverse osmosis system is warranted, which can cost $15,000 to $20,000. Many contaminants can cause GI issues, cancer, and have been cited to be especially dangerous to pregnant and nursing women and young children. This is a real significant concern that we are facing, and you can see that poses not only financial concerns but health risks. I urge you to not only be concerned about not acquiring revenue, but consider the welfare of your residents. What good is extra revenue if you are negatively impacting the well-being and possibly health of your residents that you have been elected by or elected to protect? I honestly feel that if the town is more concerned with blindly accepting any sort of proposal for financial gain without considering its tax-paying residents, including elderly and small children, who are very susceptible to air, soil, and water pollution. I have spoken to many of my neighbors about attending the meetings, and they said that they feel like this is the decision that has been made without that their concerns do not matter. It is also a sad fact that your own residents, who you have been elected to protect and act in their best interest, feel that they are not supported or heard. In the last public hearing for the zoning board, I was told to sit down without even being able to read my statement, just because it was emailed to the zoning board prior to the meeting. Apparently, that took place of me being allowed to speak publicly about my concerns. What's the point of a public hearing then? At previous meetings, Tractor Supply has stated that they want to work with the residents of Fowler House Road and are open to suggestions and concerns that we might have. However, I found that this is also false. After the zoning board meeting, which was 2 months ago, I reached out to Matthew Darling twice, as my husband and I had questions regarding what will be against our property line. He never answered either emails. I then reached out to the town multiple times over the past few months, who tried to get in touch with Matthew to no avail. As you can see, my confidence in the town of Wappingers and Tractor Supply to protect our well-being or act in any way in our interest at this point is non-existent. If Tractor Supply is eager to squeeze their store into this small plot of land just to save some money, then the least the town could do is come up with something to mandate that they fund the extension of the town of water sewage to the residents of Fowler House Road. This would at least provide us some assurance that although we will be facing air and noise pollution, loss of privacy, and impaired home values, we will not have to worry about our well water being contaminated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Gail Pfeiffer. I live at 4 Fowler House Road. I've lived there for 33 years. I'd like to address the town board about the Tractor Supply project, which has been approved by the town planning board and the zoning board. I am in total agreement with what was just presented to you, and that is my feeling also. I feel like we've been here to so many meetings and we've expressed our concerns, and people are on their phones, not paying attention, not looking at us, no eye contact. And I feel like this was already set in motion even before the town planning board met. The residents on my street have talked about their concerns repeatedly. I personally have nothing against Tractor Supply, but I only hope that they will continue to comply with all the agreements that they have made to us to ensure our safety and privacy, although some of it is not really spelled out in full detail. This isn't the problem. The problem, I feel, is that because the commercial land has been for sale for so long, the town approved the sale without taking into consideration the fact that the area is much too small for this type of project. Whether or not our street gets town water or sewer, the project should have been rejected at the start, and the buyer should have been encouraged to seek out one of the abandoned buildings on Route 9. At a minimum, the planning and zoning boards could have made an effort to do this, and in addition, they should have walked the property line as Dr. Thurston did to see what's going on here. I'm very disappointed in my town. I am not clear on how town proceedings work, but I do know from being at the meetings that there has been talk behind the scenes, as evidenced by the town lawyer's comment to Tractor Supply to see me later and we'll talk, which was made at one of the earlier planning board meetings. As was just stated, a letter that was being read to the planning board on behalf of a neighbor who was unable to attend. The person was cut short because the board said they had read the letter, but if it wasn't read in completion, was the whole thing made part of the public record? And how about what was just proposed and stated at the beginning of this session, where the comments that we're making aren't being properly recorded? I don't understand how that could happen. I don't.
I published it verbatim, what the lady had written. It's really saying that.
Didn't you, Mr. Beal,
He
talk?
objected to the verbatim.
No, hold on. First of all, this is out of order, but let me just say that my objection was that the lady's words were verbatim, but the other speakers were not verbatim, that's all. We have multiple layers of record here, so it's not the end of the world. You can always watch the meeting back
Yeah, we
on
do.
video,
We do.
which I've done. But my point was just more of a matter of formality, that's all.
All right.
No one's trying to suppress
Right.
what people are saying.
They weren't verbatim. The woman had given me a Word document, rather than for me to parse out the parts that I would think are necessary or not necessary. So I took the whole document. No one else provided me with the Word document. If you provided me with Word documents, I would copy it and paste it. But for me to start parsing out your your statements here to be inappropriate. So I actually did her a favor by publishing exactly what she had said, but not verbatim, just copy and paste, as I do for many different times when people speak here. They'll give me a Word document of it, and I'll just copy and paste.
I guess you're hearing my frustration, and I misunderstood what was said, but you're hearing my frustration at my
No,
town.
and we appreciate it, and I assure you that Mr. Paoloni has
Right.
been attempting to capture the
I
best
understand
record
that, but
with
it's
all that,
just,
so.
it's just, there's a bigger problem here than just that. The bigger problem is that this project, I think it was set in motion before we even met. And I feel like everything that we've said is being pushed under the rug so that Tractor Supply can get their project going. What are you gonna do about the water on Fowler House Road? Are we gonna get water? I'm not gonna, I personally, I'm not gonna use my water if they have town water and my well is contaminated. It's a serious problem here.
Yeah, I think we understand.
And it's a big financial problem, too. And why should I, as a taxpayer, pay for their project? Okay, so we're also, and I really don't understand, because we're being led to believe that the town board members don't have a say in what the appointed planning board members decide, but who acts in the community's behalf. We were told, well, we can get a lawyer, but I live in this community, and I depend on you people to help us to understand where we're coming from. We're a very few houses on that road that are completely up against where Tractor Supply is going to be. And I can tell you that what's going to happen is they're going to say that they can't do everything that they said that they were going to do because they don't have enough room, okay? Because there isn't enough room. So the whole issue is very emotional for me. This has been an arduous and painful process, and I wanted you to know at this last public hearing how sad and broken I feel.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other comments from the floor? Brian?
Yeah, good evening. I'm Brian Dancer, 6 Fowler House Road. My wife articulated most of our concerns at the last meeting, and she probably did a much better job than I can, but I do want to refresh a couple of points and respond to some things that I heard at the last meeting as well. There are a host of things wrong with the variance this project was granted, starting with the need for it. The only reason that's ever been provided is a statement made by the applicant about the required size of the store, and those statements are not true. Tractor Supply's own webpage and their annual shareholder report states their typical store is significantly smaller than the one that they propose to build here. My wife quoted the dimensions at the last meeting. Also at that meeting, the ZBA did not comply with their obligation in the code when they granted the variance. Their decision was made and written before the public hearing was concluded. There are 5 items they're required to consider when granting a variance, and my wife spoke to each of those individually at the last meeting. Their decision mentions none of them. The code also requires the ZBA to grant the smallest variance necessary, not necessarily what was asked for. I just spoke about the size of a typical Tractor Supply store. If it doesn't really need to be as big as was claimed, well, then a smaller variance would allow for a smaller store would allow for a smaller variance. And the ZBA, based on their own statements, knew that the store could be smaller. My neighbor at 10 Fowler House was in the middle of discussing exactly that point when she was interrupted and told they already had the information. You heard that from some of my neighbors already as well. This variance makes no sense for anyone but the applicant and this one tenant. This store is going to be set back from the road 125 feet farther than all the nearby commercial properties. A future tenant that needs all the space in this store is going to find 40% of their parking located behind it. And we already have developed commercial property nearby sitting vacant. I don't understand how this is good for the town. If there are counter arguments, if there's legitimate reasons why this is good for the rest of us besides the applicant, I'd like to hear them actually, because I haven't. If this were a thriving business already in this location that needed to expand, that would be a good reason for a variance. The only reason we've been given to date is a claim about the required store size for this tenant. That's not true. I've been of the opinion that this variance is required to make the development fit in the available property, but at the last meeting, Mr. Horan characterized it differently. He said it prevented them from having to develop additional space at the back property on the western edge. If that's the only issue, then I'd ask you to send this back to the planning board, because if they're prepared to develop space at the west end, then we can eliminate some of the development on the south side and move this whole thing further from my backyard. It would take one change to this development to move it 25 feet farther from my yard, which is double the distance they're at right now. So if they can go west, then I think we need to go west. What I heard here last time, though, was basically that all the planning and zoning issues are water under the bridge because this board has no oversight function. Well, I disagree with that, too. The code gives you the authority to appoint those boards, require training for them, and remove them for absenteeism, tardiness, neglect, malfeasance, and inefficiency, among other reasons. How would you know any of those things were an issue unless you were performing oversight of their work? If that's not specific enough, then water, which is exactly what we're here talking about, is a special case. Take a look at 234-9E, which states, and I'm quoting here, "No application shall be granted unless the town board shall find that the proposed project complies with the standards, requirements, codes, rules, and regulations of the governmental agencies hereinbefore referred to, as well as to any standards, conditions, requirements, rules, and regulations of the town." That would be like the requirement that says the ZBA is only to grant the minimum variance necessary. The applicant told you at the last meeting they were ready to put in a well if need be, and I imagine that's a consideration regarding whether or not you're going to grant their application. Here's the thing, though. They told me they couldn't put in a well because their project is so large that it needs sprinklers, and a well would also mean a fire water storage tank for those sprinklers, which, because of our climate, would have to be heated, and that it was all too expensive and would prevent them from moving forward. Their words, not mine. But at the last meeting, they told you they were prepared to do it. So I don't know whether what they told you wasn't true or what they told me wasn't true, but I think that needs to be settled before it's used as a basis for granting their application. Some other things I heard at the last meeting. Dr. Thurston mentioned capacity issues with the existing sewer system. I think that needs to be settled before granting this application. It doesn't make sense for the town to ask existing customers to bear the risk of adding volume to the system if its capacity is already in question. The applicant told you they were ready to come and bring jobs. That's great, but we aren't exactly starved for retail work. There's a grocery store, a department store, 2 coffee shops, and a warehouse within 5 miles of this project, all hiring for those same kind of jobs right now. The coffee shops have had postings up continuously for months. More jobs certainly aren't a bad thing, but maybe we shouldn't get in too much of a rush for the benefit of a few retail jobs when we aren't even meeting the existing demand for that kind of work. The applicant told you what good neighbors they were trying to be, building a berm and a fence. I'd like to point out, and I think you've heard the emotion from my neighbors already, that it feels a little different to us. The first time we asked for that berm was in February, after the applicant sent us the first mailing informing us of the project. We had a phone call that covered the berm and along with a bunch of other requests. They said no to every single one of those requests. They didn't agree to that berm until July or August, so it doesn't really feel like they've been all that gracious with us. We made another request later that I thought would have been an easy one, but have never gotten a reply. It was just paint. I'd kind of like to see a mural on the south side of the building facing my house, maybe something that looks like the trees they're going to cut down to put it up. Barring that, though, maybe we could at least get rid of the big red stripe. Again, though, no reply. And the applicant told you they were all ready to pay their own way into the water district. Well, I'll tell you, I'm ready to pay my way in too. But I've never been given the opportunity, and I've been waiting for 20 years. And now, my new neighbor wants to roll the dice with my well. Regardless of whether this project is approved in its current or some modified form, it is going to alter the flow of surface water, and no one has looked at how that's going to affect the recharge of groundwater and in turn, our wells. Last week, I heard our water should be taken up as a separate issue, and I disagree with that as well. That would be great for the applicant to roll the dice and hope there's no impact on our wells, but I don't see why we should be asked to bear the risk for their benefit. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments from the floor? Seeing none, I would like to make a few comments, take my prerogative, and then the other board members may have the opportunity to speak some. And I appreciate the comments very much. And I think we all do, because this has been a discussion that we've had a lot of as a board. In my review of it, and I think the other board members would say that in reviewing both, the planning board and the zoning board of appeals issues. You know, we've reviewed it in the context of kind of the oversight that you mentioned, to the extent that that's oversight, but we do, you know, monitor the attendance, we do review the board members, and, you know, take it seriously within the parameters that we have under the town code and constitution to address these issues. You know, the town has considered a number of your factors, and in fact, you know, to address one of the points, the resolution that the planning board finally passed, I was here for that meeting, and actually it was a result of myself and Mr. Horan talking along with Mr. Stolman, the need to have a higher degree of specificity in the resolutions than we normally have. You know, and that was something that, you know, the town board wanted to have, so that in fact we could have oversight, so to speak, in this matter. And in fact, I have discussed this also with Ms. Roberti, who is in charge of our building code, you know, department. And, you know, we will assure you that as to any permits, any COs, the whole process that we have the ability, and we do have a lot of ability, especially under Mr. Horan's resolution, because that was I nearly fell asleep during the resolution, but it was comprehensive. I know you may not understand it, and we will be happy to explain it, but we're going to monitor this thing like a hawk. And I assure you that when there's issues, particularly with relating to wells or water, we're a member of MS4. You're going to hear about, you know, another program we're doing on water. We have a big matter pending right now concerning the aquifers. So we're going to be monitoring this. Department of Health, you know, you don't see it, but we get the Department of Health involved when we have questions about complying with what has been approved. So I assure you that this board, through our staff here, is going to be taking some very more close examination of this, and I know that the legal counsel and engineers they have are fully aware of the legal requirements. May not have addressed all of your concerns, and hopefully they'll still take some of this back. Nevertheless, I do have some concerns, and I do want to state them here today. One is I am bothered if, in fact, you know, Tractor Supply officials did not go and meet the residents. We had a previous board issue on another matter where we required that particular company to go out and talk to the resident in concern, and in fact, that particular applicant did go out and had extensive discussions with that resident. So that does bother me, you know, and that goes to a bigger concern that I have. Our responsibility of town government and this board takes it very seriously, is to ensure the sustainable development that is done responsibly for our town and our neighbors. Okay, there, you know, has been significant vacant property. A lot of that, though, is outside of even our influence or control because of what we call dark leases. So, you know, I don't know what Tractor Supply did, but I can only imagine if they did look at some of those properties, the dark leases would bar that. But that being said, you know, there are growing infrastructure issues in this town, which we're talking about. There's water, there's sewer, highway congestion, schools, although that's not in this case, MS4, you know, to name a few. You know, and I do ask myself, as I asked Tractor Supply this evening, you know, what are the benefits to our town and neighborhood in this, you know, process? You know, our neighbors are worried, so are we. You know, but where is the social responsibility to the town, and particularly the Flower House neighborhood? You know, our neighbors do have septic issues. There are failing wells. You know, there is, you know, number two, an issue. Now, what I find very interesting, and what I challenge Tractor Supply on, is that Tractor Supply makes it clear in all of its publications and all of its materials that it takes great pride in and responsibility to its communities. Our mission is to work hard, have fun, and make money in order to support our commitment to give back to the communities we serve and to make a difference. They focus on that community in agriculture, pets, animals, veterans, and the community. Make donations, make a huge amount of money, donate to the community. Where is that? I don't see it. I haven't heard that. Now, is that the responsibility of the planning board? Maybe not. Is that the responsibility of the zoning board of appeals? Probably not, because they have a more restricted. But it's our concern, you know, in looking at the community, and that's what I think all of us really are. So where is it here? You know, you say in your publication and your materials, you know, you'll do whatever it takes. Well, quite honestly, I don't see that happening. You know, I looked at, you know, the Tractor Supply believes a healthy environment, properly managed resources, and vibrant communities are keys to a secure and prosperous future. It goes on with lifestyle, environment, business. You know, I worked as a general counsel and responsible for CSR, corporate social responsibility, for a Fortune 100 company, market cap of $230 billion. You know, our Councilwoman Bettina works for a company that takes social responsibility very seriously. I'm not putting words in her mouth, but they certainly do. So I have a concern. You know, I like the idea of maybe putting up some sort of escrow fund or something that will help as we tackle the development of water and sewer going down Route 9. That's a major, you know, interest and commitment of this board. You know, so we have two major neighborhoods going down there, Fowler House and one other not farther away, that do want water, need water. So the last point that I'll make, you know, before I turn the floor over to my comrades here, is back to sewer. I am very concerned, and the one area we can, you know, vote against is in sewer and water issues. And it is a major issue in the town. And as everybody knows, we have sewer capacity issue, we're dealing with Tri-Muni, and the number one issue is I&I. That's the infiltration and inflow. And that's what's keeping our capacity back into, you know, actually non-existent additional expansion. You know, why not create a fund? Why doesn't Tractor Supply create a fund to assist in this area? And then, you know, we can help deal with, you know, because a lot of this I&I is coming from impoverished areas that don't have the money or the wherewithal to do it. So I challenge them to live up to the words in, you know, their publications of community responsibility. So I'll end my comments here, but I do have concern, but I also see where the code has been, you know, I think fully followed. The town council and I, working together along with the board's input, have put in a lot of strict, you know, requirements that you don't find normally in these sort of things. So, you know, I do thank Mr. Horan and the, you know, council, you know, for doing that, although there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'll turn the floor over to somebody else.
Any comments from anybody else? Okay.
Just, yeah.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
We have a master plan in this town. A lot of work went into it, a lot of money went into it. Certain zoning is in place to meet what we need to be a prosperous community. Has this property been rezoned? I'm asking council.
David?
I don't believe it's been rezoned.
It's just a variance.
Let me, please.
It's been
I'll just
the
answer.
way it is for a long
Thank you.
time.
But it's commercial.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I understand where the residents come. I understand fully about water, more than you know. I understand Tractor Supply is coming in with a project that meets the requirements, that is part of the town's requirements in a commercial aspect. Our planning board, who I hold in high regard, I've been a member of that planning board. Our zoning board of appeals, I hold them in high regards. And as well as our professionals. They're here to protect all of us. This is our neighborhood. I know it doesn't seem that way to you, but unfortunately, it is. And hopefully that we can resolve whatever issues in a good way. But at the same time, if all the constraints have been met, and it's okay. I'm for fairness. Thank you. Bill?
So as the councilman that represents this area, obviously, I have been in this role for 13 years. I'm the senior town board member. I have been involved in the comprehensive planning process. I was on the comprehensive planning committee when we did that overhaul of our comprehensive plan. Just, again, would like to clarify some things. The town board, again, doesn't have a role in the process that you spend most of the time speaking about. In other words, your discussions about the stipulations that you had requested through the zoning board and planning board process, that's not something that we are involved in at all. In fact, I've been on this town board for a number of major projects, and I was kind of taken back by some of the comments at this meeting and previous meetings because we don't review those plans. We set forth the zoning for this town, okay? That is our job. We set this zoning commercial a long time ago, along with many other parcels on the Route 9 corridor, in an effort to advance water and sewer. In fact, I believe the town code requires that commercial development within these zones have to connect to town sewer. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's a law in this town. So us to sit here and have a debate about if they can connect or not, to me, is moot, because the law in this town requires commercial development to connect. Why is that? That's to protect the residents and to minimize the impacts, so that folks aren't having a package plant in their backyard that is distributing effluent into the waterways. This was all part of the comprehensive planning process. Relative to water, it has been our goal here in this town to extend town water down the Route 9 corridor. Water and sewer, in my opinion, should have been extended in the 60s and 70s when there were 90% reimbursement rates. It was not done. Many towns on the Route 9 corridor, or some towns, I should say, did take advantage of those reimbursements. The town of Wappinger did not, and now we find ourselves spending millions and millions of dollars to try to extend water to areas that need it. I've sat here in this position on at least 4 different occasions lobbying for water to be extended into the Fowler House and South Fowler House neighborhoods. Why hasn't it been done? Because there's only 55 homes between those 2 roads, and to take that cost and divide it among those number of residences is cost prohibitive. I do believe you have a point relative to the applicant paying for a portion of that water and sewer, but that is something that I have not had any experience discussing from a town board perspective on setting those types of stipulations on an applicant that's applying to develop on a commercially zoned land. I just want to make sure that people understand we have among the strictest wetland regulations in Dutchess County. Our wetland requirements are stricter than, I believe, the state requirements. Right. And that goes back to 2007 or prior to that. We take development very seriously in this town. We have been very specific on how each one of these types of projects come into our town. This brings back memories of the Adams project to me, which was a rigorous project as well. The boards that have acted within their capacities on this project, the zoning board is a quasi-judicial board that is appointed to 5-year terms. We're in 2-year terms. So there are members of that board that were appointed before some of our board members were sitting here, and that's on purpose. That's the way it is. The planning board are in 7-year terms. We're in 2-year terms. These are folks that are specifically in terms that are longer, so that the fabric of these boards is running on a totally different schedule than the administration or the town board, so that there is to be no perceived political influence on these boards. So for us to have direct oversight on what they do and how they decide, I would argue is probably inappropriate. We do require them to follow very specific protocols, and I believe those protocols were followed with this applicant. I do have questions, further questions regarding what we can do to offset the impact on the existing residents having to do with water access and sewer access. I think that that should be prioritized, and that's something that I'll have to discuss from a legal perspective. But, you know, it struck me when Mrs. Pfeiffer said that, you know, her town is letting her down. Understand me when I tell you this. Each one of the board members up here takes this job probably more seriously than other towns. I can tell you that because I've been here long enough to see people come through the revolving door and leave in other towns. We spend a lot of time on the phone outside these meetings, or sitting at the Falls Diner having 3-hour conversations while my wife is blowing me up saying, "Where are you?" trying to find solutions that improve this town. So I know that this is a major impact for the folks that live on Fowler House Road. Basically, it's in your backyard, and I do feel for you. And I want to make sure that all the stipulations set forth in the planning board's resolution are attended to, and we will make sure that that happens. But there is already a negative declaration on this, and a seeker process that's been complete. This is already an approved project at this time. So that's why sometimes we remain silent here, because we are, our hands are kind of tied from the legal perspective, since this is an approved project that was approved by the planning board. and there was already discussion about many of these things from a planning board perspective. That is all I have at this time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I'll-
Patrick.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of things. I don't really want to belabor the point because I do believe the supervisor and my colleagues on the council did accurately relay a lot of the information, and I do agree with a lot of what was said. I do know that cooperation is a big thing, but I also do agree with Councilman Beal that there is a certain level of deference that these boards have to be given because they have that independence. It's important that they have that independence for this very reason. This is the way it's set up, just like you have in the federal government, 3 branches of government. Each one has a role, and there's only so much we can do regarding what their role is. They've made the decision. We weren't the ones to make the decision. I don't know if we can go back and even review that decision. I know, as we said before, there's a legal process behind it, but as far as the town board doing it, it would probably be interfering in a process that we can't be interfering with. Certainly, I do understand the supervisor's position and the resident's position that cooperation is important, and certainly anything that Tractor Supply can do to make this easier for the residents, because it does seem like a significant burden. And we are hearing you. Certainly, we heard you at the last meeting and this one as well. We spent a significant amount of time listening to you, so know that you are being listened to. That is rest assured. But realize that to a certain extent, our powers in terms of what the other boards have done are limited. So there is only so much that we can do. But realize that we are listening to you and we do take this seriously. That's all I have.
Any other comments on this? Then is there a motion to close the public hearing on this particular issue, which is water? 'Cause
I'll
we have
move it.
several others.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion to close the public hearing on the water issue is passed. Next item is a motion to open the public hearing with respect to the NERC Tractor Supply Sewer District Extension. Again, similar resolution. Please come to the floor.
Again, for the record, supervisor, members of the town board, my name is Neil Alexander. I'm a partner at Cuddy and Fader. I'm joined again with Mr. Cassidy and Mr. Darling.
Excuse me, interrupt you,
Bring
just
it
so,
up.
yeah, speak
Yeah.
some more, but so people know, there will be a vote on the resolutions later. Okay, that's still to be addressed by the board. Go ahead, sorry, and speak.
So, no problem at all. Understood. So again, we are looking, once again, in a similar fashion, we are looking to extend the sewer district at this time and have a further public hearing reading. And we again did the same extraordinary notice to the public. And once again, we are looking to only add this property again with the sewer. Actually, this property was sort of passed over by sewer twice. It was passed over in 2006, when the sewer main came through and was all approved. And actually, interestingly enough, the original design in 2006 would have put the sewer manhole right on our property line, essentially. And it wasn't built that way. It was built about 35 feet off of our line. And we tried to just drop in to that manhole, and we're unsuccessful in being able to do that. So that's why we're doing the routing we're doing straight to the road. We are aware of that the town of Wappinger is part of Tri-Muni. You are part of Tri-Muni. And one of the things that we knew we were going to do, assuming and once we have an approval or as a condition of the approval, is we have to go up to Tri-Muni. And as you are aware, they have an I&I requirement, an infiltration and inflow requirement. So we know we're going to do something that benefits the greater district while not costing anything to anybody. So they have a 2-to-1 ratio. So for our 800 gallons, we will have to do I&I probably close to 1,600. So, the hard part here in the balance for me as an attorney and a mouthpiece, I guess, so to speak, if people want to say that, is we're repeat players. And we're used to the emotion that our applications, whether it's this application, any kind of application I may do, and come before the town, and we're used to and try to, just take in that emotion and not take it back and deflect it to the public. We're professionals. What I don't want to have a misinterpretation of, and I don't want to get into a colloquy though, is the suggestions of some of the things that are said while under emotion may be a little bit more strident than the actual factual predicate. And I don't want to get into a back and forth, but I do want to, you know, announce and say that while we are past the seeker statute of limitation, we're past the ZBA statute of limitation, and those approvals, we went through 9 months of review for those. In some months, we went twice to each board even. So we have had an exhaustive review. I also want it to be understood that it's not like we're saying this is our widget and we dropped it down and stamped it on your community. First of all, your consultants wouldn't let that happen. Second of all, your code is nowhere near the standard widget. Also, we did meet with the neighbors and we have email trails, and I don't want to get into like a pushback, but I do think it's important as far as getting the needle back a little closer to neutral to say that we received emails. We made project changes. Loading zone moved to the north side of the project away from the neighborhood. We had a whole meeting where we talked about nothing other than that berm and fence, with the public telling us how they wanted it, the berm and fence to be. I understand they didn't want the project. I understand they didn't want a building anywhere near their household. But we did talk once we got to that juncture on this commercially zoned as of right use about the fence. We made several accommodations to the architecture, and we did other things. And I just didn't want it to go unsaid that, you know, somewhere between 12 and 24 meetings of input, the neighbors have had the opportunity to speak at many of them. Some of their suggestions have been incorporated, some of them have not. And there are costs associated with all of those things going in there. So the notion of what that berm with those trees and all of those things, plus the fence, I mean, if you think about it, we're berming up, but then we're putting a fence down at the bottom of the berm not on our property side, on the other side. There's an expense with that really long fence. And we're facing the good side to the neighborhood, obviously, because we're not going to see it, understood, but there's a cost with that. And obviously, since we can't get access to it, we're putting in, you know, a vinyl, high-quality vinyl, 25-year fence type of idea. So the notion of what are we doing, well, that's an extra cost. Having to go back on our standard prototype and re-engineer for a northern side loading dock, that's an additional cost that we did. The architectural input we received and the changes that we were asked for and where we needed to move the building, there's a lot of cut and fill on this site. Those are additional costs. So we have incurred costs. And, you know, at the risk of quoting Shylock in the Death of Venice, you know. Merchant of Venice, excuse me, sorry, thank you. Thank you. I was already thinking next sentence ahead. Thank you for correcting me. You know, the question here is it just for a pound of flesh? Is it just to skew us, or are we trying, or is it to make the project better? Right? And I think that's where what I'm trying to say is we've spent a lot of first costs with the planning board, with the zoning board to make the project better. Right? And at the end of the day, allowing us to have water, sewer service, and sewer service here means that we're getting those services from farther away and making that stuff go away too. And you know, we didn't harp on it. I didn't have Mr. Cassidy come up during the water, but one of the things that was discussed with the planning board also was that essentially you've got, as every community that has a state highway that's become more retail oriented, Route 9 in particular, the state didn't necessarily, when they designed and built that road, have EPA and DEC stormwater construction mandates going with it. And their culverts aren't necessarily the same way we would build culverts today. But part of what's going to happen here is that stormwater's flushing off the property. What it does now is it flushes and then it runs. And where does it run? Down a hill. So all that salt from snow and removal and treatment, where does it go right now? Well, our stormwater systems can intercept that and take it into our system, which is going to go into our quality and quantity treatment per MS4 standards. Now, I can't guarantee it's going to be better for the neighbors, but intellectually, it should be. We're not trying to say, we didn't say we did it out of the goodness of our heart. we did what we had to do on the MS4, but there will be a benefit. So I just think it was important to move the needle sort of a little closer to neutral on that, and I appreciate you indulging me and giving me the latitude to sort of set the framework to neutral on some of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comments on the sewer, question?
Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public
Second.
portion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Motion passed. The next item is to open a public hearing with respect to Myers Corners Landing Water District expansion. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? That motion passed. Okay, any comments, public comments with respect to that? Okay.
Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public portion.
All in
Second.
Public
second.
hearing.
Public hearing. All in
Second.
favor? Yep. All in favor? Aye. Nays or abstentions? The motion passes. I have a motion to close over all the public hearing. I'm not sure if I need to do that.
I don't know, well, we can make it anyway. I'll
Yeah.
make that motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. Next issue is to, not issue, but it's to open the public portion for this meeting for the other, matters that we have here to discuss this evening.
I'll make a motion to open the public portion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? That motion passes. Are there any comments on other aspects of the agenda?
Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public portion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? The motion passes. The next item is with respect to discussions. As I mentioned earlier, we've been looking a lot at, very closely at ways to preserve the watershed, and particularly as it relates to Wappinger Creek. And tonight, Corey Yusevich from the village will come up here and provide an introduction to the board of what is happening with respect to the plan, what we call 9-element watershed management plan. So Corey, please come on up.
Good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm here for the 9-element watershed plan. Wappinger Creek, this is actually all in your agendas too, on page 2 and 3. Wappinger Creek is the biggest watershed in Dutchess County. It spans almost 135,000 acres, spanning 11 towns, 2 villages, and it's been a very vital water source to this region for centuries now, and it's never been in worse shape. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of pollutants that have been in it. They've been coming in more and more every year. More would come in than the year before from a bunch of different locations on the creek. And it's gotten so bad that New York State has actually put Wappinger Creek on their 303D list, which includes water bodies too polluted to meet environmental standards, and they actually require the municipalities around to fix this. So the Village of Wappingers has applied and received a $287,500 grant from the Department of State to try and combat this. And the first thing we're doing in this is creating this 9-element plan. And what it is the village has collaborated with the Wappinger Creek Intermunicipal Council, and we have been holding public meetings, collaborations with all of the municipalities on the creek or near the creek, and we've been trying to work together as a large community to try and combat this pollution and try to save the water, because not one municipality is at fault, so we feel it's in all of our best interest to try and solve this problem. So going off that, we hired our subcontractor, KC Engineering, and they actually did they tested land uses in different areas. They did some near sewers, some near farms, playgrounds, even just on the side of the road, anywhere in Wappinger Creek. And they kept sampling these water sources for an entire year. And they recorded their results. And we have this water characterization report, this brick novel I've brought with me. I didn't print any more copies for just trying to conserve some paper, but this will be online at the Village of Wappingers website if anyone is interested. It is super, super informative about what is in our creek and what's going on. And I've read it probably 3.5 times already, and I'm still learning a new thing every time. And one of the main reasons I'm here is because we're looking for anyone and all, public and board officials, to come to these meetings. We're trying to grow the 9-element plan to anyone who is living on or near the Wappinger Creek. And the next meeting for the 9-element plan is, which is also in the agenda, where it says save the date, is on October 8th, it's Tuesday, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Farm and Home Center in Millbrook. Again, this is a public meeting. Anyone and everyone are welcome. And we sit and we go over things like this report. This report's spoken of a lot. And we just try and plan together as a large community on different things we can do, different ways we can just combat some of the pollution, because I'm sure many of you, like myself, have lived here for a long time, and you know, you look at the lake, you drive by the lake every day. It didn't used to be like that, and we've been told in 10 or 15 years it's possible that that lake could very well become a wetland. It wouldn't even be, by definition, a lake anymore. So it's a pretty serious issue. It's a very important body of water, not only for drinking and safety, but just regulation. You know, you can't even swim or really boat or fish in it like you'd be able to used to. So it's a really important problem. We think everyone here it's in their best interest as well to sort of get behind it. So if anyone is interested, again, this is on the Village of Wappingers website, and anyone's more than welcome to come to these 9-element plan meetings. So.
Would you be having one closer so the residents in this area can attend versus
Fortunately, we don't.
Millbrook?
Kind of a central location, because again, it's, you know, Rhinebeck, Plains is in a lot of different groups.
Can they alternate different locations maybe?
We've
You know, we
suggested that
can
before,
we
Corey.
can bring that up actually. I'm going to bring that up at the next meeting.
People can Skype the
Yeah,
meeting. I
yeah.
mean, that would be beneficial, and people can give their comments.
Definitely.
And if they're available to even help,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I'll definitely be there, so I can
And I'll be there.
broach
I
that.
attend. I'll raise it at the next meeting. I
Yeah, but
raised it
this way
before.
people would be able to give
Right.
input.
Yeah,
and
it's a little bit of a
things
hike.
like that. That would be beneficial, I
Yeah.
think,
Mhm.
to your cause, because I agree with you. It's a beautiful lake. It could be, it needs to be improved.
But 17 feet of sludge
Yeah.
Yeah.
now and growing.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I mean, that's what you get when you have, I mean,
Yeah.
upstream towns and,
Yeah.
That's right.
you know, from development, from sewer plants, from
Farms.
everything that
Said that,
dumps
yeah,
into
the
this
farms.
upstream, it's all gonna land somewhere, so it lands there. And, you know, obviously something needs to be done, about this, but, I'd be curious to know, what exactly has been done to date, because I've been hearing the Wappinger, there was another committee, the Wappinger Creek Watershed Committee, which was pretty active back in the day. I don't know if it's still active, but you know, there's always been a lot of discussion, a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, but I don't really see much change. You know, I know here in this town, we've had ongoing conversations about trying to limit the amount of sewer plants that are dumping in, but I mean, that's the dirty little secret. People don't realize that there are sewer plants up and down these waterways that dump effluent into these waterways. And, you know, people have been swimming in these, you know, we talk about people swimming in ponds and lakes, you know, back in the day, how great it was, but I would argue that it wasn't great because they weren't testing the water. They were swimming in E. coli water, basically. This is not a new thing. What's going to solve this type of thing is to limit the number of these 40 or 50-year-old package plants that are dumping into the creek. Anytime we get a significant amount of rain, all you have to do is go to the DEC website and look at the sewer discharges that are happening right here in Dutchess County. It happens every single time we have rain. And all of that ends up eventually where? In the Hudson River, where they have a swimming area in Beacon. So we need to kind of change the whole school of thought on this, because I agree that it's good to have proactive meetings and to be applying for grants, but at the end of the day, we're seeing a lake that's getting shallow, more and more shallow each year. And ultimately, it's all sediment that's coming down from upstream. And that's the big challenge. So I certainly support the mission of the 9 points and would hope that we can see a real change of methodology from the upstream areas.
Yeah, and I, would add, we'll be talking a little bit about it later on Wildwood and what, because we're trying to, impact positively with respect to the effluent, but you're absolutely right.
There's an organization in Beacon, CARI, I think, Ecosystems, or CARI, that has something to do with the Hudson River. That is one place you should also contact. It's on Main Street in Beacon. They're very active in, the river and cleaning, I think it's CARI.
Cary Institute, maybe?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
CARI
CARI.
Institute.
I believe it's CARI Institute,
Okay.
and joining municipalities, having them involved, they might be able to give you valuable information.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Any other
You're
comments?
Any more questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
They're really big.
The next item is just really a brief one with respect to traffic calming, which is really the measures that we're trying to look at to reduce some of the speeding and issues on the highway. Just wanted to report that Senator Serino has taken a real interest in this, and that I'm going to be having a meeting, and you're more than welcome to attend, although I know most of you work at other jobs, but on the 2nd of October at 12 p.m. at her office in Hyde Park to discuss speeding, various things. She's been looking into it along with Lydia, and she's been now taking a real interest in this. So we're going to have some discussion on what can be done with respect to the town issues, a variety of issues on that.
October when?
2nd.
At 12?
12, I think. And that's, and I'll get an email out
Yeah, maybe
to
you
all
can-
of you. I just was
Yeah,
confirmed
thank you.
today earlier before this meeting. And also to report that we have increased again somewhat the patrols out there, which are much more visible. We're getting a lot of good comments back, from them, and in fact, increasing with ticketing, where it proceeds. But I think there are a number of issues, and I think Senator Serino has now discovered that there is an endemic issue, with respect to some of the stuff that we're facing. But I had raised it, in a letter and gotten their interest, so that's proceeding. So I'll send out an email notification
Yeah.
to you on that, but I just wanted to let you know.
I did appreciate your letter lobbying the state relative to speed limit oversight for towns, most specifically our town. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue for towns, having any control over speed limits, which to me is imperative, especially on town roads. It's been a challenge, and I know that the Association of Towns has tried year after year after year to petition the state legislature unsuccessfully, and I hope we can find some better solutions.
So, in response to that letter is what Senator Serino is addressing, and I'm really appreciative of her interest and concern. Just talking briefly about legislature, I see Kevin sitting here. I won't call you up, but he and Randy Ross have continued to pursue with respect to the Veterans Highway, and actually made great progress over since the last board meeting. And so both Senator Serino and Assemblyman Lawler, correct, are going to be submitting legislation, to get that through, and that looks like that will get passed. They've been looking at locations for the signs, and before something is finalized, you consult with you. But that's making some good progress, and has actually gotten a lot of interest, thanks to their efforts.
Yeah, I'd like to see where those signs will be going before they're
Right.
erected.
Yeah,
Please.
we will.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. The next item is, Jessica, would you come up and just discuss, the interview process for basketball instructors? And, we just received, I think, a resume, so tell us
Yes.
about that, but we'll probably want to have some more involvement in it, so please go ahead.
So we had a really short turnaround time on this one. We had less than 3 weeks between when we received notification that our instructor wouldn't be returning to this being the last board meeting before the class starts on October 7th. And in that less than 3 weeks, we were absolutely blessed to be able to have a couple of good candidates that applied. One of them, and the one being my recommendation, being sitting right behind me. So I would like to invite him up to tell him a little bit about himself and his experience, which is extensive, within basketball and just coaching in general. So, come on up.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Speak closer to the mic.
Yep.
I was
I'll raise
just
it up.
scolded for not speaking closer myself, so.
Thank you, Supervisor, and thank you, Council, for having me here. And thank you, Jessica, for offering me, and hopefully it's something that we continue and that I be a part of the Wappinger Recreational. I am a resident, town resident of Wappingers for 14 years. I am, my profession as right now, I've been a federal mortgage consultant for 20 years, a federal mortgage consultant for 20 years, but I've always volunteered in the coaching firm. I am actively at Fishkill Recreational for the biddies and for the girls division and all ages division. I am actively volunteering for CYO in Fishkill. And I am currently, so I can open up a division in Wappingers, I am the president and owner of AAU basketball program in Dutchess County, which is my program I run. I have coached for 30 years in all aspects of sports, baseball, basketball, football, bowling. I've done bowling for Panis High School. My daughter graduated and she won a championship at Fairleigh Dickinson and years back. So I've done multiple aspects. And as I mentioned, Jessica, I was told by one of the parents that I coached for many years in this area, a recreational basketball program for the Wappingers, and I would love to be an addition to help grow the program in any aspect that I can. Because when I moved here, I looked for years for different programs for like games and practice a little bit more extensive. So I had to go out of the community in Fishkill, go out of the community East Fishkill, and roll over. So it would be great to be part of. And I know what we're looking, what everyone's looking for as far as parents. And I gave her a few of my parents as referrals. So again, I could go on and on about but I'm actually excited. So if I'm talking a little bit too much, it's because this is something I've always wanted to do for the community. And when this presented to me, I actually came here and spoke to her and told her I wanted to be a part of the recreational and put an application for it. So
Maybe I missed it. What was your name again?
I'm Eugene Vargas.
Eugene Vargas. And where do you live?
I live in 21 Beechwood Circle. Yep,
Okay.
right behind Adams Farms.
Gotcha.
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I have not had a chance to meet with you and talk with you, so certainly, you know, I would like to have that opportunity to sit down and talk with you, Eugene.
That'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Was there other resumes that you received on this position?
We had 3 other qualified applicants. You always get a lot of applicants who are just putting in with no experience, but we had 3 others that I interviewed. Yes.
When does the program start, Jessica?
October 7th.
Ooh.
Yeah, we got the notice that our instructor wasn't coming back late in the first week of September. So.
Could you, though, email to each of the board members, the other 3? I think,
Absolutely.
you know, it would be
Resumes,
nice
please.
to see those.
Sure. Thank you. Sure.
Right, but don't we have to act on this tonight?
Yeah, I think
Because,
so.
Yeah.
This
yes.
program
Unfortunately,
starts
I guess.
before the
If it's
next town
October
board.
7th.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we didn't have a lot
I
of.
guess one of the things that will be coming up later, for purposes of the budget, the town supervisor had to present his budget on September 30th.
30th, yeah.
Okay.
And at some point before October 5th, the town clerk has to present it at a town board meeting. So I was proposing scheduling a short town board meeting on October 30th for presentation of the budget.
You mean September 30th?
Yeah.
September 30th.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the board is.
We could add that one agenda item, I suppose.
Well, we do have that, setting dates for budget meetings, right? So let's add that in all the dates, because there's,
That's just, it would be a very quick meeting, and,
Yeah.
if everyone can't make it, all you need to have is a quorum. It's a formality, but, I was proposing it on the 30th. The meeting could take place anytime that week if the board is not available on the 30th. But I would give you one other meeting.
yeah, I think I can do it.
Well, I mean, are we gonna get in the business of interviewing every coach for?
No.
I mean,
No,
you-
but I'd like to see the other resumes of applicants.
Right, but we have-
Before we make a decision
Right,
on
but-
any position that we're hiring people.
I'm just a little confused because we don't interview or even discuss any of the other coaches at all.
Yeah, but I think it'd be prudent that we do, considering that we pay these people. I'd like
I would
to know
argue
who
that
we
that's
are
the department
hiring.
head's responsibility, but, you know, I'm not so sure that.
That's my position. I would like to know who we're hiring and who has applied for jobs that we are appointing people at. You can send me resumes, or send the board
Oh,
resumes.
can
It's
we
important.
then, I don't disagree at all, Bill. Can we make something, can we do a conditional one that's, say, subject to my interview and just making sure there is no objections? I don't know, just trying to find a way, because we do have to get the program in place.
I have no objection to the candidate at all, and I'm in a position to support that candidate. Whatever stipulations the board wants to set for further or secondary interview, that's fine. I think
yeah.
he's more than qualified, and his record speaks.
Well, yeah, and just for the record, asking the director specific questions, you've looked at all the resumes, correct?
Correct.
And based upon that, you recommend this candidate, correct?
Wholeheartedly.
Okay, then I don't have any issue either.
Based on your recommendation, I have no issue.
Thank you.
Fine. I just would like in the future, any positions that we are considering candidates for,
Say again?
that I have the pleasure of seeing the resumes before a decision is made by any head.
I can do that.
Thank you.
And I still would like to meet with the candidate.
I won't hide him, I promise.
Yeah.
I won't.
So that I
Yeah,
can-
he's
Yeah, I'd like
he's
to meet with him
local,
too.
so
Okay.
we'll
I
set
mean,
up a time this week.
Just to clarify, I don't have any objection to the supervisor as, the administration meeting with any employee that's hired or authorized by this town board. I mean, the day-to-day functions of the town are overseen directly by the supervisor. So certainly, I think it's appropriate for any new hire that's authorized by the town board or department head. The protocol should include meeting with the supervisor, certainly. That's just my position.
Also, to that, you need somebody to get this program up and going,
Yeah,
too.
we do.
Yeah.
So it's not like we can wait 2 or 3 weeks to
Right.
do this, so.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand my fellow council members' concerns about making sure that we're, basically kept up to date and informed on the different candidates and things like that. So I think in the future, I think it would probably be incumbent to do that before you bring this candidate forward. But I think in this case, he certainly seems qualified, and you recommend him, so I don't have any issue with making that motion to appoint him to that position.
I would
Wonderful.
second that too. I have no
Yeah.
issue with your resume. You look quite qualified and,
So do we have a motion?
Yep, I made the motion.
Okay, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
You can
Yeah.
come time to time and tell us how it's
And-
going with the girls.
And Jessica can help you set up a meeting with me. Okay, thank you very much. The next item is an update with respect to Carnwath. I just want to make one, report to the board that we are looking at, Sue should be completing shortly the review from a certificate of occupancy, and particularly with respect to the chapel and the administration building. So I'll be sitting down and talking with her after she's reviewed that. Well, the specific reason really tonight is we have some friends here that have a proposal they'd like to make with respect to farmers market, and this is a group of folks that, had been really at, the village,
Bless you.
and that did not go as they had hoped, and so they've sat down with me and have a very interesting, concept and proposal, so I thought at least have them bring it before the board, and whoever the spokesperson is, come on up, introduce yourself and the group.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shannon Lasher. My husband Brian and I own Lasher Meadows. We do farm fresh eggs and poultry, and my daughter and I also own Hippie Chicks Tie-Dye. I'm here to propose a farmer's market. We would hope to have it year-round. May I borrow your copy? Because I do not have one. But let me go ahead and read my proposal. Please accept this letter to propose the use of the facilities located at Carnwath Farm in the town of Wappinger for a year-round farmer's market on Sundays. I represent a conglomerate of approximately 30 vendors and would be very interested in participating in a market in the town of Wappinger. We offer a variety of services and products which would make a market very appealing to the public. Currently, the town of Wappinger does not have a farmer's market, and I feel it would be a great benefit to the local economy. Many in the immediate community believe in the value of local goods and products and are very supportive of a local market. Plus, there are not many year-round markets within Dutchess County. This would make the town of Wappinger much more attractive to residents within the immediate and extended community and draw people from other municipalities to the area. The correct targeted marketing at commuter stations would also bring people from outside the area. The variety of vendors wanting to participate would make the market very appealing and be grand enough to be a one-stop shopping area. Year-round produce, meats, eggs, prepared foods, household items, crafts, and essential body items are just a few examples of products sold by vendors interested in the market. Such a variety gives the impression to a person that they can spend some of their time on a Sunday shopping the market and be set for the week only to return and continue the cycle. Allowing the use of the chapel at Carnwath Farms during the colder months and the outside upper parking area during the warmer months would allow the market to be sustained year-round with minimal effort. Vendors would pay a small fee on a weekly, monthly, or even yearly basis to contribute to the upkeep of the facility. They would be responsible for all setup and cleanup. Again, this is a great asset. Adding this great asset to the local economy with minimal effort necessary from the town of Wappinger. With the proper advertisement and support from the town, Carnwath Farms has the potential to become a weekly destination for many people in the area, which can only benefit other local businesses. It is my hope that this proposal is swiftly accepted so that we may begin planning the market to bring to the area within the early fall of 2019. Thank you so much for your consideration.
And can I have your name again, please?
Shannon Lasher.
Shannon, thank you. I think it's a wonderful idea, and it's a wonderful use of Carnwath.
I think, as I said, subject to what we're looking at is, getting a CEO, for the chapel, in place. I think it's a great idea, as well.
I support it 100%. We just have to make sure that we have the right process in place here,
Yeah.
whether it be a license or
Yeah.
some sort of MOU or MOA, so that there's appropriate insurance coverage for the folks there.
I do have experience in running other farmers markets. I did attempt to run the Village Market this year, which went out of the way. We're also about to take over the Hyde Park Farmers Market. So my husband Brian and I do have a lot of experience with all of the background of running the markets, the insurances that are necessary, all of the requirements for the different vendors. We definitely would want to require each vendor to carry their own insurance to protect themselves as well as you guys. As I said, everyone will be responsible for their own setup and cleanup. I believe probably be better off to have an application with a contract, stating all of your stipulations and rules. That way the town is totally covered and the vendors are also carrying their own insurance. So any questions as far as that, we do have experience with the whole background of running a market. So we can be of any help with that.
Do vendors ever need power or water or anything like that, or how's that work?
As far as food vendors, they do require running water
Okay.
and soap to be able to wash their hands before serving prepared food. Electric, most vendors do not require. We use electric. We bring generators. We have very small, quiet generators. We bring our freezer and refrigerator every week. Otherwise, everyone else that we have ever worked with usually brings their own power supply if it's necessary. I know that our chef could use a generator as well. Really, the only biggest requirement I know is that we need to have adequate restroom facilities where the vendors can properly wash their hands.
So since the water or electricity is now running as a short term at the administration building, Steve has to finally do a couple other things, but that's all ready to go. So that building, and getting the heat on, that would be, capable of supporting that. We discussed that with her.
So
as
we're ready
well.
to accommodate the market at Carnwath?
Yeah,
at this
that's
point?
subject to making sure the CO, for the buildings is properly issued.
Do we know how long that's gonna take?
Well, Sue's going to get to it. She couldn't look at the file today, but hopefully in the next few days, we're gonna address that.
Yeah, I
And the
was gonna
weather's
say,
still
because
nice, so we can be outside for
Yeah.
a few more weeks.
'Cause I was
We
gonna
usually
s-
run till
Yeah, I was
October.
gonna say, I see a target date of early fall, which is actually now.
Right,
so that's why-
now.
That's why I
Like
wanna make sure that we're
ASAP.
everything ready.
As soon as we are all,
Yeah, exactly.
I have vendors all day. Today I had 6 vendors ask me, what's going on, what's going on? Everybody is really, really jazzed to get this market going, get this
And they have an
started.
impressive group of, people, vendors that.
What were
we
the
talk-
problems in Wappingers?
Last year, we had 2 ladies that were running it. It was fantastic, wonderful. Unfortunately, they both had to step down. They told a lot of people that there wasn't going to be a market in the village this year. Spring came around, and I had vendors contacting me all the time, what are we gonna do? So I contacted Trent Atkinson, and he and I got together and quickly put this market together. But I think that a lot of people didn't know what was going on anymore. There was very little support from the village as far as advertisement. We didn't even have a banner up until almost August. There's just no foot traffic whatsoever anymore. Looking at the park last year as compared to this year, last year we saw a lot of families walking through the park with dogs and kids. There's literally nothing there anymore.
It's changed that much.
It really has, and I cannot, none of us can explain it. It's very sad, but, there are a lot of very, very anxious vendors that really, we can make this a destination. There are a lot of us with a wide variety of products.
Yeah, I think the city of Beacon does a year-round
They
farmers
do.
market. Have
Theirs
you
has
contacted
been-
them?
Well, theirs has been dropping off in the last few years. Last year, we had talked about attending the Beacon Farmers Market, but in talking to other vendors that had gone there, they had mentioned the decrease in customers, so we decided against doing that.
No, I mean, have you spoken to them for some,
No. No, I have
this
not.
works really well, this doesn't work really well?
No.
Because I know they still go on, it's been going on there for quite a few
Yes,
years. And the
right.
population in that city has really increased. So I
Yes.
believe that will be picking up, for their sake.
Right.
Jim, is this something that you need to look at from a legal perspective or
Sure,
anything
certainly.
like that?
What
Does he
entity
have a
runs?
copy? Please? Thank
Sure,
you.
thanks. And what's a good email address to contact you? Is it in
I
here?
think it's great.
Yeah, Beacon.
They have this, yeah, but it's coming back now, all the people that are living in there, the kids, they think it's lovely. They have friends that live there. But I went to this in Maine,
Great.
and it was
And
phenomenal.
what entity runs the Hyde Park Farmers Market? I know it's
I'm
on.
sorry?
What entity runs the Hyde Park Farmers Market now?
There's a couple that runs it along with the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
The Chamber is our backer.
Okay.
We're taking Hyde Park over the next
Okay.
year, but we've been working with them. But they back us. Brian, you know a little bit more about that?
No, that's okay. I just.
Oh, okay.
Because I know it's on private property, so I didn't.
Yes.
I know it's not on, town property,
Yeah,
so.
there's
that was
they
my
have a
con-
deal set up
Right.
with the,
Right.
So it's basically a private one on private property.
yeah, we
It's
have
on-
it,
right.
hold it in an old
Does
car
Eileen Rohr get
dealership.
involved in it? Have you talked with her supervisor up there?
I'm sorry?
Eileen Rohr?
Oh, yes, she's a customer every
Okay.
week.
I'll talk with her.
No, I mean, it's,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I know some of the vendors. I used to be town
Yeah.
attorney in Hyde
Oh,
Park,
yep,
and I
okay.
know some of the vendors, so.
So,
I think it's a great idea.
So what we should do, if we're gonna fast track this, maybe look at some type of agreement that the town can,
Yep,
can
that's-
entertain at the next meeting, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, for the outdoor portion, I'm not as concerned. The big concern that I have is, in years past, we basically have shut down Carnworth for the winter. So there hasn't been any snow plowing, there hasn't been, any maintenance of the
Well,
buildings.
there has been snow plowing recently. This past winter, they did snow plowing.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the main drag, so
Yeah.
if we have it in the chapel, then we've addressed that, so then they could plow it up there and take care of the parking.
Yeah, so, I mean, so long as the parking's adequate,
Right.
and I'll reach out to Marshall and Sterling and, talk about what they want to see in insurance coverage.
Maybe have it
but,
on the 30th.
Yeah, we just need to make sure that, we cover everything on this, because
Right.
obviously
Yeah.
the certificate of occupancy in the chapel is something that needs to be in place prior to occupying it.
Right.
And we need to make sure that we can occupy it under the pretenses that currently exist at Carnwath.
Right.
And I'm not sure how porta-johns work in the winter.
Well, that's where, again, if we have the administration building open with the toilet facilities there, then yes.
Okay.
That's what we'd be looking at this point.
So
Otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't use a porta john at that time.
No, I don't.
That's a big trek from the administration building to the chapel in the winter, so.
So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. I support it 100%. We just need to make sure that we get everybody together on this so that we can do it the right way.
Yep.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you guys very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
The next item that I have, I mentioned this before, and then since the last meeting, I have had a nice discussion with Vol Griffiths, since we had the resignation of our EEOC officer, and, we increasingly need to have one. And so he's been, after I've explained what the position entails and that it's not going to dominate his time, Barbara and Sue are also more than supportive of having him, take over that responsibility. I believe that he'll really, work hard on addressing that here in the town. I have a summary. I have his resume, and then also some of the basic requirements of EEOC officers. And this would be really just stepping in the place of the already existing budget line and taking over what had been B's responsibility.
I'm going to be honest, I do not have a copy of what the requirements are for this job, and I would like to have had them.
Yeah. They're here.
I know, but before we appoint anybody, I would like to take the opportunity,
Okay.
maybe like to table this for executive session.
Okay. There's a motion to table.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Motion passed. The next item is for a review update on Wildwood Sewer. This is relevant to what we were talking about earlier on the 9-point plan. Tim Mood is going to give us an update on that.
Right, so we've been responding to a checklist of about 15 items from DEC. I just highlighted quickly tonight in the interest of time. The big items that are left are the final bond resolution that will actually physically bond the project, and working backwards from there. There's a notice of estoppel requirement, which is a legal matter, which I don't even know if it's going to apply.
That's after the bond.
And that's after the bond. And EAF forms, the EAF was done. I think it's just a formality of having a signed copy. I think Supervisor may have even signed it, but we need to submit it to EFC. Kind of chicken and the egg with the EAF. There is a comment on SHPO. We feel we can't satisfy the comment until we sort of engage the design services, in which we would hire an archaeologist to do a phase 1A and 1B. So that's on our to-do list. But the big one is the 202B, which is,
I thought we had something on the EAF on that, but I'm not sure.
I think we may have it satisfied on the EAF, but it's still coming up as a comment from EFC.
I mean, with respect to the EAF, what it was is we were looking at, in essence, running a water main in a highway right-of-way, which was already disturbed. So the determination was made that, archaeology was satisfied. I thought SHPO was satisfied with that. So maybe if we just
We just
reach
need to
back-
prompt them for that no
reach
impact.
back, yeah. So
right.
that, I believe, was where it was left.
So we'll follow up with that. And
Yep.
then the 202B is going to be the result of our map plan and report, which is adopted by the town board, but we still need to get together and figure user rates, which I think there's some progress recently on it.
Right, so with respect to the 202B, the costs associated with the project are pretty much nailed down. But part of the 202B, in addition to how much the project itself is going to cost, we need to have a handle on how much the operating expenses are going to be. So this project is to connect to the village of Wappinger's sewer system, which would then transmit the sewage to Tri-Muni. The agreement that we had negotiated with the village is that the sewer, they would charge the district, the marginal cost for them to handle the sewer. So, they're working, we have a concomitant agreement regarding water, which we've just finalized some marginal costs on the water side. The village is gonna get us some marginal costs on their sewer side.
And Frederick's been involved in that discussion along with Jim and myself.
So hopefully we can get all these pieces of that particular puzzle and maybe get together.
So once the
and-
202B is finalized, then we can adopt the bond. So the town board would then adopt the 202B, which is an improvement to a sewer district, improvement for facilities of a sewer district. After the 202B is adopted, in fact, the same day that's adopted, the town board can adopt the resolution, the bond resolution. So the 202B has to be adopted before the bond resolution is adopted. The EAF and the SHPO had to come before, which that was done. And I'll hand it back to Tim.
Okay, and then just moving down the list, there's again, some of these are from EFC where it may look like on the surface. Here's another one for you, Jim, this claims litigation and private operator. This is one John Lazzaroni was coming up with, says needs to be confirmed, but would it appear to eliminate the ability for Woodhill Green to be part of the grant work? Which,
I'll go back and look at that,
Yeah.
because I know we had discussions regarding Woodhill Green, so.
Yeah, and they're part of the intermunicipal agreement, so, and that's 9. And then finally, 10 is again, we have prepared a draft report relative to the EFC and DEC's comments, but there's blanks, and the blanks are all relevant to the financial discussion that we're talking about. So we really just need to pin down the dollar amounts, and then I think a lot of these things will just fall in place sequentially. So the rest, I mean, you could work down. So recently we have our engineering agreement in place from like 2 months ago now from the board. From there, we're able to consult with minority and women business enterprise. They're, sub-consultants to us. We get proposals from them. We submit it to EFC. We recently got approval from them on our utilization plan. So 12 and 13 are done. 14 is done. 15 is done, and 16. We're still doing a sliding schedule here. As the longer it takes for us to get the financial pieces and up to the 202B piece, we're just pushing the schedule along accordingly. But I think for everybody's knowledge, EFC really wanted to have this fully executed and closed by, I think it's May of 2020. So even though it sounds like a long time away, we need to kind of get this finalized. So.
And we've been having regular meetings, and so they really want to get comfort before the end of the year if
Correct.
they can, so.
Yep.
And I think we'll be there at least on our points. The one thing with respect to the bond, and again, what you typically do with a bond resolution. Right now, the sticking point really is, the one thing we were waiting was finalized costs. The other thing was the cost of construction and the operating cost of the system. So we've got the cost of construction pretty much nailed down, at least as a good estimate.
At
It's
this
never going to
stage
be
of the game,
finalized.
right.
Never going to be finalized until we get a contract in hand. And then we would have the operating costs, which again, we need it for the 202B. We do not need that for construction because it's going to be, that'll be set based on the existing village system. But we do need it for the 202B, and then the bond resolution is going to authorize the maximum amount of the construction cost absent any grant, but we would then borrow less than the authority. So to play conservative, you would put a bond resolution in place as to the maximum amount of the grant in case there's any overruns or anything like that, or for some reason, the grant money is either limited or isn't renewed or something to that effect. So we would then have that in place, that way we could go forward with construction. We just don't borrow it, the debt service doesn't get paid until the money's, you know, actually borrowed. So, that protects the town, the best way, you know, by adopting the bond resolution. Doug, good friend, and, Tom Bond Council prepared all those resolutions. And I've done enough of these with Doug, because I know what he's gonna say ahead of time, because he always says the same thing, so.
Thank you.
So we're making progress, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next item, Steve Frazier to report and request consideration with respect to outfield fence replacement at Castle Point.
Right. The outfield fence for the softball field at Castle Point is in very poor condition. Probably 50% of the posts have pushed up out of the ground due to frost heave. Some have been damaged. The fence is, it's the webbing on the fence itself is stretched in places and rusted. I got a ballpark figure of about $15,000 to replace that. I believe that would be eligible to come from Parklands Trust, and I wanted to get an input from the board on whether I should proceed and get the required quotes then to meet the procurement policy.
I think it's important people use it, right?
Right, we do have softball
Okay,
leagues in there
it needs to be
every year,
fixed.
right.
So I think it's important for the residents there.
No, I agree. I think at some point, I know this is not a discussion item, so I don't want to necessarily discuss it now, but we also need to discuss some of the fences over at Robinson Lane too, which I do believe need to be addressed. So let's hopefully have that at a future meeting.
Yeah, I agree. Also, what did the soccer leagues ever do at, I know it's a different point, but at Castle Point?
I know.
Did they use them
We
this
did
year?
not, we
Or
didn't
no?
end up following through with that.
We didn't, okay.
No.
Make that whole thing.
No, there were some issues with the ones at Rockingham, but I think we talked about that, so you'll look into that.
Right.
One of the just ancillary issues with respect to the parks that Steve and I and Jessica still need to sit down and get back a recommendation to the board, but I think more in the budget cycle, is who's going to be opening and closing all these gates, right? We continue to have these issues, so as to maximize the use, but that's something we'll address, because I think actually Jessica has a proposal, you know, with respect to
That
the
would be great.
budget line. So we'll be discussing that more, but I just want to raise it, because Steve has actually been working on Bill, I think even this past weekend, got a call, I get calls on Carn West.
Well, I was
and
going to
other
say, yeah,
parks,
we
so-
need
Well,
to
actually,
revise those
that's
town rules and maybe even have a number
Yeah.
where somebody
So
can
we're, yeah.
call during off hours in case of an emergency.
The town rules issue will be up to the next board, I assure you.
Yes.
So I should move forward
you.
and bring you folks then for.
Yes, I'll make
Yes,
that.
go ahead and do that.
Please.
Yes, please,
Well,
Steve.
Thank you.
what I would
need a-
say, would it be advantageous for us to look at all the fence needs that we have right
That's why I
now?
mentioned about Robinson Lane, because I know there are
Rather than
some issues
just
there.
the one park, would it be better for us to, in addition to that one park, look at other specific fence needs and get a, you know,
Lower bid, maybe,
global
or-
quote maybe for all these repairs? Or is it easier to do
I think
it?
you'd be in the area of a public works project then, if we went that route.
What's that, 50,000?
No, 35.
35? I mean,
Right.
if we are in that, if we're in that 35,000 range, then the procurement rules change, but, you know, is it to our advantage to look at now, as we're going into the fall, to look at our fence needs so that we can be in a position to have these repaired for the spring?
I'll put something together for the next meeting.
So,
Yeah, it might be advantageous for budget season as well, to make sure.
Well, I
we
mean,
can-
either way, these are capital improvements.
Yeah.
That can be argued that they're capital improvements, and these would be probably qualified under Parkland Trust, like you said. But I'd rather address multiple parks if we can right now, if we can get a better price, perhaps, from the vendor, and have ourselves on
Yeah.
better ground in the spring.
That's a good point.
Well, I mean, you're gonna pay prevailing wage whether it's subject to competitive bidding or not. So the prevailing wage issue, you have to pay regardless of whether you do one park or whether you do 5 parks.
Right.
So
But-
the only question would be, you know, the cost of doing bid specs. And
Right.
to the extent it's fencing, I don't think you necessarily need any kind of really serious
It's all probably-
engineering specs.
It's chain
but you
link
can
fence,
just-
right? It's all-
Right, I mean, you could spec it out, but I
Yeah,
think,
So I personally would like to see Steve prepare that for us, and we move forward.
That's fine.
On
Can
that.
you have that at the next meeting?
I'll work on it for you,
Okay.
And I'm not saying every single inch of
That's
the.
2 weeks from now, correct?
Right.
Or-
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the one on the
There's,
15th.
you know, the non-budget meeting, yeah.
Right.
I'm not saying every single inch of the whole town. I'm talking about, in your mind right now,
Yeah.
there's 4 or
He knows.
5 places in this town that need fence repairs.
Because he's
big time.
already covered that, and
Right.
some of them in the
So let's get
budget,
them all.
Yes, here's a list
There you
on
go.
that.
So get that to us, and we
Yeah.
can authorize going forward with
Yeah.
getting, this way we can get
Right.
something done.
No, he's
before-
already reviewed the list, so it shouldn't be too hard.
Right.
Very good, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you,
Steve.
Mr.
Okay.
Frazier.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next item, and I know we have a resolution too, is setting dates for budget meetings. After that, I'd like to propose a short break to just go and do whatever we need to do, just briefly.
I have no issue with these, but I did have a question regarding the October 23rd note
Yeah,
here.
so that's the one that I couldn't attend the 23rd, but can we do the 21st?
21st is fine with me.
That's fine with me.
The only problem with the 21st for me is I have to be sitting on an Eagle Board review at 6 o'clock. So why don't we go ahead and do 7:30, and if
Yeah.
I'm late, I'm just telling you right now,
Okay.
I'm at it.
Yeah, you're-
So the one issue that was raised, and the reason why I had suggested a Wednesday, was because of televised meetings. On the 21st, the planning board has a meeting.
Right.
So we do not have the capacity to televise 2 meetings at the same time.
Right, so what I would say is,
So one meeting would be televised and one
right,
meeting.
right, I would just say Plan B is, we'll talk to Mike, get a separate camera that can be in the corner of wherever we're gonna have
Yeah.
that meeting. We'll make sure the public understands that the planning board schedule is gonna preempt us, because
Okay.
that's their normal schedule, and then he can play that on the channel when there's free time.
Right.
I don't think anyone's gonna
Yeah, we'll
object.
talk with Mike. He may have the capability to split it and do.
What, do a split screen, you have planning
No,
board on one
no, I
side,
mean just,
town board on the other?
but, he'll get it on the website.
Left and
They
right.
can do that, right.
No, I mean, I agree, and we have so much access right now to video.
Right.
I tell people all the time, if you don't catch it on the channel, you can go to our website and find it on YouTube. There's so many different ways to watch the meetings now, which is good.
I appreciate the accommodation. It's my son and grandson's birthday celebration. I haven't been to one in many
course.
years, and so going to go for the 23rd.
So we'll go with 10:21 at 7:30,
Okay.
is that correct?
And the other dates are okay
Other
with the
dates
board
are fine.
members?
So I guess the only other the only other date that's kind of out of the ordinary is the town board meeting on the preliminary budget. So the first, by law, the town board needs to have the hearing on the preliminary budget no later than the Thursday after Election Day. I have it scheduled for November 6th, the day after Election Day.
Yep.
But again, the town board,
I have no problem with
I
that.
have no problem with that
Okay.
either.
Not at all.
These dates look good to me.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
I
fine with me.
agree.
So I'll move that we adopt the resolution with the change to the special town board meeting that's indicated as Wednesday, October 23rd to Monday, October 21st at 7:30 PM.
I'll make
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Joe, do
nays
you
or
have that
abstentions?
resolution? I sent you that.
Motion passed.
And,
Okay.
and I guess you'll have
Okay.
to put a resolution number on it, I suppose. I don't see. Okay.
May we have a motion for a short adjournment?
I'll move
I make
that.
a
We'll be
motion.
back after that. Okay. Second, all in favor? Aye. Nays or abstentions? Motion passed. Thank you.